Hello everyone, August 4th, 12:59 p.m. I just wanted to do a follow-up video again to my last two ones. And yesterday we got into a little bit of La Salette, Our Lady of La Salette, and I have done videos on this one before. But upon doing further research, I think it's important in the context of what we talked about yesterday as far as timelines and whatnot go. I think it's important to point out that there are two versions of the messages, the secrets, if you will, from Our Lady of La Salette. Now, the one I read yesterday is the more recent one, I guess from 1879, it appears. But that one is not the original. And it is thought that Melanie, one of the seers, largely added to that after the fact. And what I realized in going back and reading both of them was the original message to me was almost less detailed, shorter, but more accurate to what we are seeing right now. I'll be honest with you. If we're looking at the context of what I talked about yesterday, the great apostasy, if we are in the end times apostasy or if we are in a apostasy, that's not going to result in the end of the world. Now, if we're looking at it from this perspective of the original message, it would seem to me that we are more in the end times apostasy. So let's read through this. And I like how he explains it. This is Daniel J. Castellano. And he points out both versions. So anyway, so I'll just read what he says. The apparition of the Virgin Mary witnessed by Maxim and Melanie at La Salette on 19 September 1846 has been one of the more controversial approved private revelations, in part because there is so much misinformation regarding the content of the message imparted to the children. Some of this information was propagated by Melanie herself in her later years, most infamously in 1879 tract that was placed on the Index of Prohibited Books, yet still enjoys popularity among traditionalist publishers misled by the imprimatur of the Bishop of Lecce. So that one did have an imprimatur, which is why people do refer to it. Those who have only casual knowledge of the story of La Salette may easily mistake this extravagantly embellished apocalyptic narrative as the true content of the revelation. And here's what bothers me about that one that I read yesterday, and I meant to point it out yesterday, and you can probably see it from my facial expressions. Dates. I think anytime there are specific dates in a revelation, in a private revelation, in a prophecy, I'm not interested really in, because it's just not how it works. Prophecy is fluid. Prophecy isn't exact. It's largely symbolic, and it can be mitigated. It can be, the timelines can be pushed off. So I'm always more comfortable with the ones that give a general timeline, such as the original message. So, um, extravagantly embellished apocalyptic narrative as the true content of the revelation, leading some to believe in a false apocalypse, while others understandably reject La Salette altogether as unworthy of belief. And I think that's unfortunate. I don't think that's the case at all. To correct these common misunderstandings of the message of La Salette, it is essential to return to the original accounts and their various versions and distinguish the primitive version from later embellishments. This has become possible for the first time in over a century thanks to the rediscovery of the original secrets submitted by the children directly to Pope Pius IX in 1851. We will compare these authentic secrets to other versions that appeared over the years and explain the relationship to the originals, thereby constructing a documentary history of the revelations of La Salette. So the public message was very not specific. I mean, it was more specific to their particular era and their particular village. I'm not going to read them because that's not what we're talking about. But basically, a famine that happened and things like that. Not working for 7 days, not eating meat on Fridays. That was in there. So we can read Maxim's Secret as well because I didn't read that one yesterday. So The children of La Salette adamantly refused to disclose the secret messages until finally in 1851 they were persuaded to write the secrets and send them to the Pope for his eyes only. Maxim wrote his secret in July, but several weeks later, at the behest of his friend M. Dawsey, he wrote a prophetic fantasy which Dawsey took to be authentic. Maxim often took this approach to those who would pester him with requests for prophecies, and he insisted that the secret given to Dawsey was a fiction. This unfortunate practice of the boy had the dual effect of propagating a false apocalypse that to this day is ascribed to Maxim, as well as perhaps damaging the seer's credibility regarding his authentic revelation. Against this later possibility, we should count the consistent testimony of M. Dawsey and all others who knew the maximum throughout his life and attested to his unassuming simplicity and guilelessness. This useful innocent exudes through the simple narrative of the authentic secret to Maxim recovered from the Vatican archives in 1999. So here's his secret, the original, and as far as we could tell, maybe the most authentic one. On September 19th, 1846, we saw a beautiful lady. We never said that this lady was the Blessed Virgin, but we always said that it was a beautiful lady. I do not know if I do not know if it is the Blessed Virgin or another person. As for me, I believe today that it is the Blessed Virgin. Here is what the lady said to me. If my people continue, what I will say to you will arrive earlier. If it changes a little, it will be a little later. And I want to pause there because I think that is proven throughout time. Prophecies, they can be mitigated, the timelines can be changed on them. And that's one of the reasons why Jesus says, the end of the world, only my Father will know. Only my Father in heaven knows. When he was here on earth, he said that. Because it's dependent on the fullness of the number of conversions. It's dependent, and there's no way for anybody to know that except God, who intimately knows our hearts. France has corrupted the universe. One day it will be punished. The faith will die out in France. 3/4 of France will not practice religion anymore, or almost no more. The other part will practice it without really practicing it, like cultural Catholics. Then, after that, nations will convert. The faith will be rekindled everywhere. A great country in the north of Europe, now Protestant, will be converted. By the support of this country, all the other nations of the world will be converted. Before all that arrives, great disorders will arrive in the church and everywhere. Then, after that, our Holy Father the Pope will be persecuted. His successor will be a pontiff that nobody expects. Then, after that, a great peace will come, but it will not last long. To me, that sounds like an era of peace, maybe not. Just a era of peace, maybe not the one prophesied in Fatima. A great peace will come, but it will not last long. A monster will come to disturb it. And I think this guy's interpretation is that this is the peace between World War I and World War II, and the monster is Hitler. All that I tell you here will arrive in the other century, at the latest in the year 2000. Maxim, she told me to say it sometime before. Okay. So this is how this writer interprets it. The entire secret is written in the simple dictation of a peasant boy. The interpretation of the secret is far from simple, however, assuming that all that was prophesied should have occurred by the year 2000. We should be able to match the events in the secret with actual history. That France has corrupted the world is obvious in the sense that France is the philosophical birthplace of liberalism and secularism. The French Revolution was all Mason ideas, as well as one of the most aggressive promoters of these ideologies from the Napoleonic era onwards. It has also been at the cutting edge of artistic and cultural decadence, especially at the fin de siècle. France's punishment may be seen either in its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War or in its surrender to the Nazis. The extinction of real faith in 3/4 of the French has certainly happened by now, though it's practically impossible to fix the date when that occurred. The apostasy of France is followed by a rekindling of faith throughout the world, led by a great country now Protestant. The most obvious candidate would be Great Britain, which ironically became the most religiously conservative of the European powers in the early 20th century. not only in comparison with the clericalism and secularism of the continent, but by the virtue of an English and Irish Catholic revival, which intellectually informed and strengthened the church throughout the world. Practically all the great English language contributions to the defense of the faith comes from this period, and I think that's extraordinarily accurate. The chronology of the prophecy becomes confusing, as it is unclear whether the great disorders in the church precede the apostasy of France or exactly when the pope is to be persecuted. The most likely pope intended would have been Pope Pius IX, who became a prisoner in the Vatican. His successor, Pope Leo XIII, became a candidate for the papacy only by virtue of filling the post of Cardinal de Angelis, who died just months before the death of Pope Pius. So that would be the Pope, a great Pope, one of my favorite popes, Pope Leo XIII, who nobody expected, right? After all the foregoing, a great peace will last briefly until a monster disturbs it. The natural identification of the monster would be Hitler, who ended Europe's brief peace and would send chastisement upon France. The above is the entire content of the secret revealed to Maxim in 1871. A more elaborate apocalypse was published in his name, but Maxim disavowed the authenticity of this in 1872, as well as other prophecies attributed to him. To this day, many such embellishments are widely circulated and inaccurately attributed to Maxim. The most common false secret contains 10 parts, sometimes the last 3 are omitted, and is most misleading because it also contains elements of the authentic secret which may have been leaked by Maxim or a church official. Alright, and then Melanie's secret is even more contested because her later version, written by herself, was so. It took this as a framework, but I read it yesterday. I didn't even read the whole thing. I wasn't really aware of all this. And it was published on a reputable site. Miracle Hunter is a pretty reputable site. So, anyway. Secret which the Blessed Virgin gave to me on the mountain of La Salette on September 19th, 1846. Melanie, I will say something to you which you will not say to anybody. The time of God's wrath has arrived. If when you say to the people what I have said to you so far and what I will still ask you to say, if after that they do not convert, if they do not do penance and they do not cease working on Sunday, and if they continue to blaspheme the holy name of God, in a word, if the face of the earth does not change, God will be avenged against the people ungrateful and slave of the demon. And all these things were mentioned in the public revelation. To do penance, to stop working on Sunday, and stop blaspheming the holy name of God. My son will make his power manifest. Paris, this city, soiled by all kinds of crimes, will perish infallibly. Marseilles will be destroyed in a little time. When these things arrive, the disorder will be complete on the earth. The world will be given up to its impious passions. The Pope will be persecuted from all sides. They will shoot at him. They will want to put him to death, but no one will be able to do it. The Vicar of God will triumph again this time. The priests and the sisters and the true servants of my son will be persecuted, and several will die for the faith of Jesus Christ. A famine will reign at the same time. After all these have arrived, many will recognize the hand of God on them. They will convert and do penance for their sins. A great king will go up on the throne and will reign for a few years. Religion will reflourish and spread all over the world, and there will be a great abundance. The world, glad not to be lacking nothing, will fall again in its disorders, will give up God, and will be prone to its criminal passions. So again, we see this theme of persecution, some chastisements, an era of peace, somewhat peace and abundance that leads to decadence and leads to people to abandon God. And then that period of time after this final abandonment of God, we read on, among God's ministers and the spouses of Jesus Christ, there will be some who will go astray, and that will be the most terrible. Lastly, so after this era of peace, people are going to return to their evil ways. And she says, lastly, hell will reign on earth. It will be then that the Antichrist will be born of a sister, but woe to her. Many will believe in him because he will claim to have come from heaven. Woe to those who believe in him. That time is not far away. Twice 50 years will not go by. My child, you will not say what I have just said to you. You will say it. You will not say it to anybody. You will not say it if you must say it one day. You will not say what that it concerns. Finally, you will say nothing anymore until I tell you to say it. So he interprets it as this: Melanie's secret has more detail than Maxim's, complementing his message as well as the public message given to both children. As with Maxim's secret, all that is prophesied is supposed to occur within 100 years, meaning we should now be able to match the prophecy with past history. The secret message contains the detailed consequences of failure to adhere to the public message of penance and piety. Unlike Maxim's secret, this is a conditional prophecy, so we need not expect all that is related to occur if the people repent, as did the Ninevites in the book of Jonah. The judgments against Paris and Marseilles may be found in some form in actual history. France was defeated in the Franco-Prussian War, perhaps in fitting retribution for Napoleon III's abandonment of Pope Pius IX, allowing Rome to fall to Victor Emmanuel. The 1870 siege of Paris was followed by widespread destruction in the city, during which most of its historical heritage was lost, culminating in the short-lived Revolutionary Commune of 1871. The text we have above is actually the second version of Melanie's secret. She corrected the first version written a few days earlier in order to clarify that the judgments against Paris and Marseilles were not okay. Were not at the same time, but completely distinct events. The scrupulous distinction proves to have been with merit, as Marseilles did not receive its chastisement until World War II, when the occupying Germans systematically destroyed the old industrial sector and port of Marseilles in 1944. Pope Pius IX, though beset from all sides with revolution, war, intrigue, and assassinations, survived until his natural death as a sovereign. If only the Vatican, in having definitively affirmed the Pope's supreme authority and infallibility on dogmatic matters at the Vatican Council of 1870. Waves of anti-clerical persecution persisted through the late 19th century and early 20th centuries throughout the continent. Melanie's secret says nothing about the extent of the persecution and the apostasy of the religious. The only famine that occurred in Europe after the Irish potato famine was in the Netherlands and other parts of Nazi-occupied Europe in 1944. The timing of the famine and the destruction of Marseilles would make World War II the end of Melanie's prophesied age of persecution. And I think this lines up with Fatima as well. In agreement with our identification of Maxim's monster as Hitler. Thus, the remainder of Melanie's secret deals with the post-World War II era, which was not discussed by Maxim. The people repents of their evils after the time of wrath has ended, as perhaps evidenced by the revival of moral and religious conservatism in the 1950s. The great king who reigns for a few years is likely Charles de Gaulle, a practicing Catholic reviled by the leftist political establishment in France. A period of moral revival and material prosperity continues through the 1950s and early 1960s, though not, of course, to the exclusion of the perennial moral and material problems that plague mankind. Yet it is the self-same material prosperity that tempts mankind to abandon religion and morality, returning to its worst inclinations. We can hardly fail to see that this is exactly what happened in the post-war era. After the upheavals of 1968 that ended de Gaulle's presidency and ushered in an era of moral relativism and irreligion unprecedented in Christian Europe and America. The last element of the prophecy is a prediction that the Antichrist will be born of a nun and be worshipped as a heavenly figure. God help us. That time, not far away, could refer to the birth of the Antichrist or his public manifestation. Since for far more than 100 years have passed, we must conclude that either the birth of the Antichrist was intended, in which he lives today, or more soberly that this final calamity has been deferred to a time known only to the Father, consistent with Christian revelation on such matters. 100 years after the La Salette apparition, brings us to 1946. By that time, the great political and religious upheavals of the modern era had all been realized, culminating in World War II. The remainder of Melanie's secret, strictly speaking, would fall outside the 100-year limit, though we may keep in mind the general principle that God is free to defer his judgments in reward for penitence, as mentioned in Maxim's secret. There are obviously many other viable interpretations of these secrets, and some may be unimpressed with their correspondence to the facts of history. As with all private revelations, we can at best have a human faith in the veracity of these prophecies, and Catholics are free to believe or disbelieve. And then he gets into the events surrounding the false secret. Unfortunately, Melanie was not content to let her prophetic legacy remain in the Vatican archives. Although her personal conduct was generally exemplary, she later found it difficult to comply with cloistered life and was heavily influenced by lurid apocalyptic writings as well as less than scrupulous advisors who wished to coax the secret out of her. Finally, in 1879, she released a greatly expanded version of The Secret, including new interpretations of the secret, as well as completely new revelations unmentioned in the 1851 version. All these new embellishments were indiscriminately ascribed to Our Lady of La Salette, resulting in an apocalyptic tract many times longer than the authentic secret submitted to the Pope in 1851. This tract contained prophecies that were either in tension with the Catholic faith, as in its assertion that Rome would apostatize, or more commonly proven to be historically false in the course of time. The false apocalypse circulated under the title of Apparition of the Blessed Virgin on the Mountain of La Salette, bearing the imprimatur of Bishop Zola of Lecce. The fact that a French tract had to seek the imprimatur of an Italian bishop should arouse our suspicions, and indeed Melanie had been instructed by her bishop not to publish any prophecies. After joining a convent in 1851, Melanie invented fantastic stories of her miraculous childhood, playing with the child Jesus and leading animals in a religious procession. Her behavior became progressively bizarre as she had hysterical fits and threatened to bite her superior. Sounds like she was almost struggling with something demonic. She was never allowed to become a sister and instead was sent off to England in 1855, where she claimed to hear voices and witness miraculous events. Away from her bishop, she began to make apocalyptic prophecies. After years of moving from convent to convent and never progressing beyond the novitiate, Melanie stayed in Castellamare from 1867 onward. When new religious orders were being formed at La Salette in 1878, Melanie claimed she was authorized to provide their rules and habits. This request was denied by the bishop and by the Pope himself in an interview with Melanie. It is in reaction to this, through rejection by the church hierarchy, that Melanie wrote her new tract, full of bitter invective against the supposedly faithless clergy, although we do seem to have a faithless clergy, as I've pointed out many times. So who knows? Who knows? I'm sure the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Not contrary to faith and morals in the narrow sense it received an imprimatur, but in 1880, the Holy Office forbade her to write further tracts. Few copies of the 1879 tract were circulated, and it was published again more widely in 1904. A third printing in 1922 with a new imprimatur finally resulted in Rome's placing of the tract on the Index of Prohibited Books in 1923, and this is the decree. So, as you can see, it's contested, it's controversial, but I do see, if we look at it through the lens of history, that the original seems to bear more weight as far as actual events, although a lot of the original and the new one do have the same sort of general timeline of chastisements, a period of peace, final unleashing of the Antichrist and, of evil, including the Antichrist. And again, we have to ask ourselves, where are we on this timeline? Was the 1950s, after the World War II ended, was that the period of peace given to the world? Or is the period of peace yet to come? And I don't know that we can definitively answer this. I've heard arguments from both sides, and everybody is so sure, everybody on each side is so sure, but I don't see, after looking at all evidence, looking at it through the lens of scripture and the lens of the catechism, I don't think it's clear at all. And I don't think it's supposed to be clear. I think it's not supposed to be clear because we are given what we need to know. And I don't know that we could handle the fullness of the truth while we're still in our mortal bodies. God reveals what he reveals. So yes, so we can prepare, but also with our best interest at heart. So that's just my opinion on it. And I did find I have some weird stuff on here. I guess maybe I don't have it pulled up, but I did find some statistics. Oh, I guess maybe this is it. That do point to the fact that we have lived in a general era of peace, where there's after World War II in the 50s, where there were no world wars. Or sorry, not. I think they have it in the 50s. I don't know. I have to go back and read this, but where there was a period that there were no. Yeah, since the end of the Second World War, the rate of deaths from all conflicts has decreased, with the most noticeable decline in conflicts between states. Most of the remaining battle deaths occur in civil conflicts, such as the tragic civil war in Syria that has been ongoing. Moreover, many of these civil wars involve foreign states, and the argument could be made major states have stopped fighting each other directly, but I think we are going to start to see a surge of that, the world's powers fighting each other. But after World War II, we haven't had any major wars. We've had local conflicts, localized conflicts is what we've had. Ridiculous peacekeeping missions and whatever else, and, you know, wars to fuel the military industrial complex, but not necessarily catastrophic wars. And I'm saying that as somebody who has lost friends in these conflicts. So I think it all depends on the definition of peace. What is the definition of peace? There's never going to be ultimate peace in the world because the world is always going to be fallen. So if you're looking for a world that is absolutely free from any kinds of struggle and suffering, that's never going to happen. But there has been a general peace. There has been. And some could argue that even Russia has been converted with the fall of the Berlin Wall and its return to Eastern Orthodoxy. Now, the Blessed Virgin did not specify they would be converted to Catholicism, so I think all of it needs to be taken into consideration, and things are not as black and white as people make them out to be. There's arguments for both sides. There's arguments for the fact that we are living in the great apostasy of the end days, where Jesus Christ himself is going to have to come down after the rise of the Antichrist. And then there's arguments to be made that we are living in a minor apostasy that's going to result in a purification period and a revival of the church within the context of history, earthly history, and maybe a general acknowledgement of living, at least living by the doctrines and morals of Christianity. But without something major happening, and I don't see that becoming a thing. I'll just be honest. But you never know. You never know. So I just wanted to put that forward. I don't like misleading people, and I felt like when I read that message of La Salette yesterday, maybe that was a little bit misleading. So I'm going to post this link below as well. And it's one of those things where I knew about La Salette and that it was controversial, but I think I forgot exactly why it was controversial. And that's why we have all these different revelations and all these different apparitions, because they do get lost in translation, quite literally, and they do get lost over the courses of time, and it's important to compare one to another, things like that. So hope you all have a great day. Just wanted to share that. Joan of Arc Media out.